Welcome to our first Orion Wealth video of 2025. We hope you have had a wonderful start to the new year. 2025 is the year of Jubilee, but for many Americans it has been anything but thus far. From the terrorist attack in New Orleans on New Year's morning to the terrible fires that have ravaged the LA area, we are reminded that life is precious and nothing is guaranteed from one day to the next. As we move through this year, may we be reminded of how blessed we are in the lives we have been given, even when times are hard for ourselves and those we care about. Before we review the latest economic and inflation news, let's take a moment to look back at 2024. We survived another election year, and what a crazy experience that was. We also had more disasters, from hurricanes to fires to floods. The wars in the Ukraine and Middle East were still actively going on. Yet, despite all that bad news, the markets moved forward. The S&P 500 was up over 20% for the second straight year, and the other indices were up double digits, including small companies and mid-sized companies. The one equity class that did not have double-digit returns was international stocks, as they lagged the U.S. stock market for the 11th time in the last 13 years. The bond market also moved into positive territory, led by high-yield bonds, which had an 8+% gain on the year. The rest of the bond market gains were muted, as interest rates, though lower than in 2023, still did not drop the way many economists had anticipated. The bond market, though in much better shape than it was a couple of years ago, is still recovering from the inflation and interest rate jumps we saw in 2022. The good news is that interest on individual bonds is the highest that we have seen in over a decade. It is just a slow grind forward, as bonds aren't designed to bounce back from tough years the way the stock market can. With all the negative news and election intensity in the past year, why would the markets be up so much again? Well, I want to remind you, the markets are based on the fundamentals of the economy and the companies that make up the indices. For the second straight year, earnings were positive, and as a result, so were the markets. As we move into 2025, I want to remind you, there will be noise from the geopolitical world, natural disasters, and pundits who say the sky is falling. Please remember, the key to the market's long-term movement is corporate earnings, which many economists expect to be strong again this year. On to the economy. The inflation readings are in for December, and the CPI, Consumer Price Index, was up 0.4% for the month and 2.9% for the year. This is a slight uptick in inflation compared to what we saw in November. The main driver of the still persistent inflation for this month was a 4.4% increase in the cost of gas. Core goods, which pulls out food and energy costs, rose 0.2% for the month and is up 3.3% year over year. This is a little lower than economists had expected. We are seeing a slowing down of costs in the areas of car insurance, airfare, and rents and shelter, but those numbers are still much higher than the Fed's 2% target. The inflation numbers for PPI, or Producer Price Index, were lower than expected month to month, but rose slightly above expectations year over year. Prices grew by 0.2% for the month and are up 3.3% year over year. The core PPI numbers, this is the main inflation metric the Fed looks at, were flat for the month, but up 3.5% year over year. This is nearly double where we were at this time last year. Inflation has been stickier than expected, which is why most economists believe we will see at most 2 rate cuts by the Fed in 2025, and both are expected to occur in the mid to late part of the year. As we begin a new year, I want to remind you of the access you have to the men and women managing your accounts. This year, with all that is ahead of us in the news, I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of the access you have to these financial professionals. You can go online to blog.ccmg.com for the latest insights from Clark Capital, or visit YouTube to watch Bulls and Bears with Herb Morgan. These investment professionals continue to provide timely information and perspective on financial news and the markets. Finally, we'll be rolling out a couple of opportunities to improve our communication and relationship with our clients this year. Please keep an eye out for a text coming from our team, as though our text number 209-701-1183 has not changed. We are required to have you re-accept the text line if you have not done so already, since we are now running the text through LPL's compliance department. Also, we hope to provide a tutorial for those of you whose accounts are on the LPL platform to better access your accounts online. We will keep you posted on when that will be available. From all of us here at Orion Wealth, we trust this year will be a year of jubilee for you and your family.